IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hi and welcome to Know Your Kanun. This is Amber from IVM Rana Ventures and welcome to our next episode with Keshav sir, where we left talking about climate change, global warming and other such issues that we are facing in India. Sir, thank you so much. And we have to continue our journey. I think the last time when we had a chat with all you guys out there, we were coming to the peace agreements, the Paris Agreement and so forth, so on about how climate change has been affecting us. And I have loads of questions to ask sir from there, and he's decoded what these environment agreements are or climate change agreements are. So welcome, thank you so much for being here. Let's take our journey forward because I don't see pollution being kept in check in India with more permissions being given for mining. But sir, we were talking about Paris, we were talking about climate change in India and so forth, so on. Now, I want to ask you, sir, there was one more protocol that was signed with regards to climate change. I think it was the Kyoto, if I'm not wrong, in Japan, right, sir?
Yes.
If you could highlight that also for our listeners, just to give a background, what was that about? Are these two connected in any way?
Amber, you have asked the right question because Kyoto Protocol happens to be the only binding agreement that was ever signed in last 30-40 years of climate change negotiations.
Correct.
It was signed in 1997 and the next year it was accepted as a Marrakesh Accord.
Right,
the fundamental idea was that in 1992 when Earth Accord was signed, which is United Nations Climate Change Accord that was signed, they created a division between the world countries. Out of 192 countries, 38 countries were kept in Annexure 1. These Annexure 1 countries were the ones who were polluting, who had 75% of the pollution at their hand. Historically, they were polluting from 1780 onwards, and they accounted for 75% of the total carbon emission in 1990. So 1990 was taken as a cutoff date. Yeah, it was taken as a cutoff date. Kyoto Protocol insisted that from 1990 position, these 38 countries should bring down their carbon emission by 5%. 5%, that bringing down 5% would be done in a 5-year period starting from 2008 January and ending at December 2012. So that was the first commitment period. Now, how will you do this? There they accepted America's brilliance in terms of negotiation and coming up with great new ideas. So they said that there will be 3 ways. Joint implementation. Joint implementation is that one developed country works with the other developed country. If they are not being able to bring down their own carbon emission, they can help the other developed country to bring down their carbon emission, and that would be accepted as their credit. So they simply put that I am emitting 100 tons of carbon. If by any mechanism I'm not being able to bring it down, I help Britain bring it down by say 5 tons.
Okay, sir.
And that would be added in my credit. So that was first one, joint implementation, which was to be done between the developed countries, which were the major polluters.
Correct, sir.
A variation of it was clean development mechanism, where America or the 38 developed countries had to put this money into developing countries, helping them transition from carbon emission to something which is cleaner, and that would also be added as their credit. And the last one was that carbon was considered as a commodity, and that commodity could be traded on a UN platform that was called Emission Trading Scheme.
Okay.
So carbon becomes a commodity. 1 ton has a price. If you can bring it down, you put that carbon, and like I have not been able to bring it down, some other country has that carbon, I purchase that carbon, and it would all be coming into my account, and that money the other country can use to bring down its own carbon emission further. So these were the three mechanisms.
Sir, if we look at this, then I think this is a very detailed model in terms of how actually it was structured. But if I say how India adopted it,
Okay.
what would be your take on that? From that we were a signatory, I believe, to that, and then we've been a signatory to this.
Mhm.
So how has our journey been? How has India adopted this? If you can talk about our policy in relation to that. Now, people, I mean, I'm not going to the law part because we know
Mhm.
the law part,
Mhm.
but the policy part, because policy makes the law, right? So we would want to
Mhm.
understand how the transition happened and where we stood at that time.
Okay. So at that time, India was at its nascent stage. We were emitting carbon like in any other country, but we
Right,
were
sir.
very low down on the list. Carbon emission again came into a political game where Americans were the absolute biggest polluters on earth,
Right.
both in absolute terms as well as per capita terms. Per capita, an American is emitting 20 tons of carbon every year. India, in absolute term, was the fourth largest polluter. But because our population is big, that was one of the reasons that our carbon emission was so much. But per capita, Indian carbon emission was at 1.2 tons, 1/20th of what America had. So a space was given to India that India is a developing country and the fundamental right of every nation is to take their population out of poverty. So
Right.
they are given a space not to pollute or to at least pollute till they meet the global standard of 5 tons per person. Till that time, they don't have any binding commitment to Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was only for those 38 countries which had a historical responsibility, means they were polluting for last 180 years, as well as they were still the biggest polluters of the lot. Now, in among these 38 countries, there was another distinction that was made. That was for Russia and the East European countries and the satellite countries of Soviet Union,
Right. Right.
Ukraine and Tajikistan.
Right.
They were said that it was said that they are developed countries, but they are economies in transition
From a
from command
socialist
and
to a
control
communist. Yeah.
structure. They
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
integrating in the
Communist.
global
Yeah.
scope.
Democracy. Yeah.
So they were also given a 20-year breathing period. Now the entire burden of bringing down the carbon emission fell on America, Western European countries, Japan, Australia, and South Africa. No, not South Africa. These 7, 8 countries, or you can say G7 countries, mostly G7 countries. America took this line that because China and India are big countries and they are in line to be the greatest emitters, absolute emission, absolute emission is also great. They too should take up some binding commitment,
Understood,
which
sir.
India and China flatly refused. They said that we need that 25 years to grow. What happened from that point on is that India and China had very different trajectories. China developed, China took millions of its people out of poverty, and they were far more successful in that. And then finally, they have taken commitments of bringing down their carbon intensity. Indians floundered a bit, and now they are on road to meet their carbon emission norms one way or the other. So the biggest polluter is energy sector, and in India you can see a lot of things are happening in energy sector, like we are transiting to what you call renewable energy. We are also working on energy efficiency. But what I told you last time is how will it pan out when it comes to saving your forest, saving
Correct.
your water resources, saving your
Correct.
agricultural land, from where you have, and or your cattle population, how you manage your cattle population. This is somewhere the crux lies, that Indians are not being
Exactly.
able to find a good
There's no
place.
balance.
Yeah,
Correct.
there's no balance on that count. Yeah.
So, given that, and I want to highlight, sir, how this, I think Kyoto also came in. The DuPont case was one of the major cases, I think, in US, where they had polluted the groundwater. And I remember in my law days, we were seeing how, because we had the Bhopal gas tragedy, which was again the worst, I think, pollution or emission which caused deaths, and now it's even causing it now. And similarly, DuPont was doing it in US for years. And I think that lawsuit started in 1990s and ended, I think, in 2019. They had a final settlement. and they polluted the groundwater. Now, when we compare the jurisdictions from a legal perspective, if you talk about accountability, I would say, sir, that DuPont was still, I think there was a lot of loss of life, but DuPont only got away with 900 million, or I don't know what was the accountability, but there was a figure I remember that only that much was paid and it was still being appealed. So when it comes to corporates and when we talk about law and policies in India, the measurable standards that you say in Kyoto were adopted, and then we have our own domestic laws, like the labor law talks about pollution from a different perspective, what emission standards have to be maintained. Then there is the environment protection, and then there is environment, health, safety, and then there are different things that we talk about when we talk about these laws. Have you seen, as an experience, I would say, in our policies, when you talk about these management of three affairs, what we see is acquisitions happening for industrial space to be grown, because we are still not a manufacturing giant anywhere. We have hardly so much of manufacturing in India. But this space, what would you have to say that, there were tanneries in Lucknow that polluted for years before we realized that things need to stop, and it continued to do so. There are so many documentaries on these policies. But Abhi, if I had to ask you two things, that you say that farmland management, where cattle is there and other things are, do you think India's policies are in line with what they had agreed in Kyoto?
Uh, the answer is slightly difficult, but then, okay, I'll try to address it.
Yeah.
The point is that India's policy circle and India's corporate, they think that the only way to grow and reach what the level of
The
America,
commercial goal.
the level of America or a Britain or France, is to follow their path of destruction of natural resources and everything.
But they,
Forgetting,
I'll stop it there, sir. But they also have done a lot of. America has maintained its natural environment in a way. Of course, corporate has, they've had the biggest manufacturers who've ruined it, but they've got it back in control. Whereas we seem to be losing track now. When I now I'll let you
sure,
come on that.
Absolutely. See, in America or in the Western world, we
China
have,
also, sir.
we have to give them one thing. They don't understand many things to begin with, but once they understand and they commit to something, then that commitment has a lot of integrity. Then you will not find many people flouting the norms. One odd ball will be here or there. Point with the Asian societies is that once we make an agreement, even after that, we keep powwowing, we keep asking for some concession or the other. So the commitment doesn't have much integrity. That is a societal issue. So it has nothing to do with laws, because Indian laws, if you can, you are a lawyer,
Right.
you know better that Indian laws are very good. The per se laws, it's the implementation part which is making a lot of creating a lot of problem for us. Now in India, the issues are manifold. One is the mindset that thinks that using coal because it is cheap to begin with will take us to the zenith of prosperity, without realizing that once you destroy that land, that forest, it will come back to haunt you 50 years down the line, which is the second generation. But nobody is thinking for the second generation. You also have a new blue sky technology available, but the upfront cost of that technology is very high. However, there is a principle called life cycle cost. If you see a life cycle cost, then you will realize that investment today will keep you in good stead 10 years down the line, 50 years down the line, 60 years down the line. Corporates were very late to think that way, and now they are adopting. Like when Reliance says that they would be installing 100 gigawatts, which is 1 lakh megawatt of solar power, it will change the game. But they came in 10 years too late. And still, while they are saying this, there are n number of corporate and there are n number of government, state governments and the central government, they are giving on leases for coal extraction. So if you are intending to shift to renewable energy, then you should start winding down your coal operations. But you are also giving lease on one hand. You are also talking about solar, expanding solar power. So what do you intend to do? No one knows. So it's like hedging your bet in every which way, whichever works out, and we'll be good. This is not the way to go about. And as far as agriculture is concerned, they want to replicate the Punjab model in every other state. And we have seen how Punjab model is now unraveling over a period of time. The
Correct.
cost of production is going up. There is a lot of there are a lot of cases of cancer in the lower Punjab
Because of
belt.
use of,
A-
yes, use of
a-
fertilizers. Yeah,
Fertilizer,
absolutely.
a
It's going to
rampant
happen.
use of,
Rampant use of fertilizers. Yes, it's
and
bound to happen. Yeah.
nobody says that you don't use modern fertilizer or
But it's over
what you
the
call
limit to have that produced.
pesticides, but
Yeah,
you need to know
yeah,
the
yeah.
right amount.
And it's also that, so like, I can give you an example of a, I mean, I shouldn't take names, but example of a big conglomerate in India where we have chips and drinks from, and they have been keeping the standards high for farmers to produce a certain quality, and that cannot be achieved without using the pesticides and the higher dose of fertilizers, on account of which your exposure, the skin to skin exposure of the farmland, the people, the surrounding areas, is bound to happen, and cancer is bound to happen, because this is it's a chemical, at least you're using, it's going to have a cost on the human life. So whether it is Punjab, Haryana, UP, and the northern states where, it's alluvial soil, but there is a repercussion one has to go through, because fertilizers are unregulated, and the company is selling them by saying it's a moderate one, we give you discounts. And sir, interestingly, the point from a law perspective is Article 48A of our constitution specifically talks about that everyone has the right to enjoy the environment. It states responsibility to ensure that environment is not degraded, and the basic parameters are kept in. And it's clubbed with Article 21 of right to life, where, life to be enjoyed, which includes environment. But when it comes to this, it's all on the paper. But when it comes to operational guidelines, even burning of fields, or, because there is no alternative provided. And now where does, knowing, when we compare ourselves to jurisdictions, when I say, when you compare yourself to US or Canada for farming, or to any other developed Western nation, we haven't been able to come up with sustainable techniques to help our population deal with it, because the growth of the conglomerate and the population, there's a huge discord between the both. One has already reached a level where it's expected to produce that kind of agrarian stuff so that it can meet the commercial needs, but the lower level is still not equipped to deal with the basic needs. How can they suddenly go to standards of a corporate who's only looking at profits and not looking at sustainable agriculture? And I like to highlight one more thing here, sir. Maybe you can talk about that? These programs and initiatives run by corporates on how they put these farms up, where you have the latest farming techniques, where they have organic stuff, and I don't believe even organic agriculture is sustainable. It is again detrimental to the environment if you do organic farming for a while.
You have actually touched the very raw nerve. You know, historically, if you see, the British came to India, they went to
Right,
the
sir.
Himalayas, they found
Right, sir.
oak trees, and they
Right,
also
sir.
found that oak tree, the wood from oak tree, is so good that it can be used as a sleeper between two rail lines.
Absolutely, sir.
So they cut the entire jungles, and
Right,
then
sir.
they realized that this wood would need maintenance, and maintenance can be done with turpentine oil
Correct,
that
sir.
comes out with from that cheed pine, uh,
Fine.
and
Correct,
they
sir.
went into monoculture of cheed pine, destroying a large part of Himalayan ecology.
Right,
So
sir.
today we are reaping that the rewards of their monoculture.
The
Like
British Raj.
there will
Right.
be forest fire in Himalayas, and
Right,
large
sir.
tracts are burned down every
Burned
year.
down every
Hmm.
year.
Similarly, when we come to 21st century, a certain size of potato is needed, and that can only come if you inject a huge amount of pesticides and insecticide
Correct,
and
sir.
herbicide, whatever.
Correct, sir.
Now, point is, it that size of potato can help you make a product which is essentially with no nutritional value, and that aesthetic, the cosmetic
Appearance.
value
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
food product jeopardizes the real nutritional value of the food. Once you have trapped the farmer in producing cosmetic food rather than nutritious food, then it's very difficult for that farmer to get off that bandwagon.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Because he has invested his life, his savings, and everything now, and he's under debt.
Yes,
He's under
he's
heavy
under
debt.
debt. Yes, he's under debt to produce that.
So then come the environmentalist who preach that let's go back to caves and start living in caves and all that nonsense. So it is actually a 180
Sparking,
degree,
yeah,
180
yeah,
degree reaction to what the corporate is doing. That riles the basic farmer because it doesn't make economic sense. And they'll say, let's do sustainable agriculture,
agriculture.
and that sustainable agriculture is organic food and organic. The reality lies in between these two extremes. You need some kind of intervention because the soil is under extreme pressure of population, and population can't be wished away. You can't kill half of the population just to adjust your business. People have grown. We have a population of 1.4 billion. This 1.4 billion people will go up to 1.6, and then in another 150 years the population will come down to 70 crore. So for that time, you don't need your needs for food cannot be met by this organic business. You need to have some intervention which is in the form of herbicide, pesticides, some kind of genomics, uh, 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 huh, and the
Correct.
genetically modified
Modification. Yeah, 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 yeah.
food and
Genetic
all
mod.
that. you
Yes,
you
sir.
you ha- you'll have to play with a variety of things, mix and match, and many combinations will have to be worked out. But you have to learn from your past and see how much is too much. Now, that decision has to be taken district by district, farm by farm. And I don't think any
There is
government,
no law in place. There is no
yes,
law in place to talk
there's no
about
law in
sustainable
place.
farming. Yeah, yeah. There's
Absolutely.
no law
There's
in
no
place.
policy in place. There
There is no
is
policy in place.
nothing in place for that. Surprisingly, there used to be a time when every district used to have a map of what it produces.
Correct.
Huh? A district yield map,
In 60s and 70s, yes,
60s and 70s.
I'm sure I've seen that. Yes,
Huh?
or paper map
So
of cloth map of it. Yes.
exactly. So you need to use big data. You need to use your digitization abilities to first make a map of what we used to produce, how we have changed, and how much can we revive it with the help of traditional methods and marry them with the modern methods. There is, I don't see any policy circle, nothing talked in policy circles, and no one has ever formulated any law regarding agriculture which talks of combining many varied things into achieving a sustainable model. We talk of sustainable models, but we never talk of what the components of that sustainable model would be.
Correct, sir. No, and you know why? I mean, I come from a farming family, so I totally understand this. But not many people do understand that in Haryana, Punjab, and especially in the upper side of Punjab, water never used to be scarce. You could find water at 40 feet, 45 feet, 50 feet. Now it's 150, 185, 200 feet, and it's slowly depleting. Like I mean, I've seen it on our farms, and I see it on neighboring farms as well. That the water level is depleting at the most. Alluvial plains where I can talk about Ghaggar plains where flooding used to be very common, but there's no flooding now for the past so many years. It's not that the bunds have come in; it's just that the water is no longer reaching to those levels, and it's a problem on account of which farming needs to also be altered because has to be an alternative source, and that is not being done. And environmental degradation, I believe, a lot of forests around farms because as your farms also expand, there is a lot of deforestation that happens, but and as the corporates also come in, the farmlands get acquired, and then it's a whole chain, but there is no balance between that when it comes to saying that this is how it should happen. I wanted to bring in lastly before we close, sir, China's because I think we need another half an hour with you to talk about our agrarian model and the laws on it, because the agrarian model which we started with in the 50s was revolutionize our farming to make us self-dependent. And at that time, the subsidies, the developments, the changes that happened, I think we need to look at that because that has died down. Farming has become a commercial, a business which is also suffering because no longer any modification or changes. I want to talk about hydroponic farming as well, which was supposed to be a great model, but it's not turned out to be cost effective at all. Rather, it's damaging to the environment also. To the contrary, I don't know, I mean, I've read a lot about hydroponic farming, but it's not conducive at all. It's not provided the results because India does not have such level of farmlands where hydroponic, even on shorter places it is done, in let's say in an acres area, but it's not yielded conducive products because I think consumption and so many things involved into it, the pesticides, etc. There are subsidies, etc. But it does not work out to be cost effective because we have small acreages of land held by farmers. But coming to lastly to China, I want to talk about China mostly. China, in terms of agriculture, and I would say the SEZ culture, the special economic zones they came out with, 2001, they were suffering from massive pollution and massive climatic crisis where Beijing and Shanghai were completely into fog during the winters, what we have in Delhi. And it's surprising to see how they have completely reversed the same to an extent, I would say. Not, of course, and I don't hold China in good hindsight as a as a nation for development, but this is something that has to be seen that along with the Western democracies, a developing nation like China, who's become now developed, has also adopted and controlled the same. How have they done so? And they've come up with massive infrastructure and manufacturing setups. What do you have to say about that, sir? What do you have an idea of what kind of a policy they would be having for this? Anything from your knowledge and experience?
See, there used to be a journalist, Guardian journalist, Jonathan Watts. He was
Right, sir.
he was in Beijing between 2005 to 2015. So he wrote a book, When Billion Chinese Jump, and in that he lists how the environmental cost has been in China over the last 30 years, and it's staggering. They built a dam called the Three Gorges Dam on
Three
Yangtze
Gorges Dam,
River,
of course. Yangtze
and
River.
in a span of 1 year, 15 lakh people were asked to relocate and
Displacement.
displaced. And in last 1 month, half of them who were resisting, they were just brutally thrown away. Where? Nobody knows. And when they were building Three Gorges Dam, they said that it would meet 7% of China's electricity needs.
Needs.
By the time it started working, it was only meeting 1.7% of China's electricity needs. And half of the time during monsoon, because of silting, the turbines wouldn't work.
Turbine work.
This kind of wastage you'll find in China. And there was this report that close to 4,000 dams that they have built
Are used.
are
Yes.
useless, are
Are useless.
absolutely
Yes, I wanted
useless.
you to highlight. They're
Huh,
useless. They have done nothing to China
nothing.
except for
So,
making monies on cement.
exactly. They have their ghost cities. So,
Yes.
the environmental cost of China's
Is
shimmering brilliance that we see is
yeah.
is close to
Way
a
too.
sham. And
Yes.
if not today, if not in our lifetime,
It's
maybe
gonna
in
burst
your
out.
towards the end of your lifetime, you will realize when the stories start coming out that 2 to 3 generations of Chinese have paid a very heavy price to put people in those 28 cities, those shining 8, 10 cities that we
Shining.
see.
Yes. Yes.
And they have extracted a lot from China and haven't given back anything.
Those model villages जो उन्होंने बनाए हैं with trains and everything, multi-story and what nonsense.
Multi-story and 7 cities: Beijing,
Seven cities. Beijing,
Beijing,
Shanghai,
Shanghai, Shaanxi,
Yansky,
Wuhan. And Wuhan
Wuhan.
has whatever Wuhan has
We
done, the whole
suffered.
world knows
Yeah.
now.
World
And
knows.
Chongqing and 7, 8 cities.
Yes.
Beyond 7, 8 cities, what is happening, you will never know.
You will never know.
But the reality is they have paid us.
Plundered.
They have paid a price which Indians can't even dream of, and we shouldn't pay. We shouldn't pay to
I
reach.
think we're already on the verge of going like this, sir, because I believe China is the worst sufferer of this environmental disaster they have created for themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And if you read reports, why I said, because a lot of listeners feel that China has been able to control environmental damage, but it is unsurmountable amount of damage that has happened in China in past 30 years.
China started a green programming of their Gobi Desert. It
COVID
has
is that,
failed
yes, sir.
miserably.
Yes, sir.
Desert advance is not stopping.
No,
Their
it's not
water
stopping.
resources are in a very bad shape. Their air
Bad shape.
quality is in a bad shape.
Bad
They
shape.
they create artificial rains to
Right,
maintain
artificial
their
rain. Yes, they
air
populate the sky
pollution
with.
in
Yes, yes, yes,
Beijing, and especially during the Beijing Olympics.
yes,
So
yes.
they may dazzle you with their immediate actions.
But there is
Okay.
nothing from nature's side they've maintained, sir.
Yes.
That we are. I'm also aware of the same, and I
Hmm.
wanted to bring that out. That it's not so easy for them, and they're suffering. They're hiding, being a communist nation again. But I mean, last take. Let's, because we've spoken about China. But what do you say about Western democracies like Germany, who are based totally on manufacturing? So Germany is the manufacturing giant, if I would say. Auto is their industry. Automation is their industry. Sweden, Norway, all these countries, such big progresses with Tetra Pak and Saab and all these big companies which they have, which manufacture, the best of the equipment in the world. How are they managing climate change as a last thing? I would say, because they're totally driven by corporates. Germany, again, totally corporates, manufacturing giants and manufacturing giants only. What would be your take on this?
These countries that you have talked about are blessed with good geography. That's part one. Like in Sweden, all the Nordic countries,
Right, Nordic countries, yeah.
all the Nordic countries, their what you call mountains are old mountains, like our Aravali. So they don't
Aravali.
have much what you call siltation. So their uh, hydropower can work all the 12 months. Okay, with very little input from outside. And
Perfect.
they don't need to maintain their hydropower plants the way we have to maintain in our Himalayas. So they can also generate huge amounts of hydropower, which is clean power. Similarly, in Germany, the wind speeds throughout the year are at a
Is
certain level.
better. Correct, sir.
Huh? So they can,
Including Netherlands. Yes, you're
yeah.
correct. It's a level. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can generate huge amounts of wind energy and be very sure that this is what energy flow would be through the year, and also on a weekly basis. They have used them to transit on clean energy.
From clean energy.
Germany also had a very robust program of nuclear power. They have wounded it down, but they have been able to transit to clean energy very efficiently, because
Massively, sir.
because their other distribution systems, their payment systems, the grid uh, connectivity
Grids.
is
Yes, sir.
very good. So they have leveraged their geography to make a clean transition. And we what we should do in India is, the thing that we have to learn from them is, our geographical advantage is sunlight. We can also make a transition to solar energy, but how much and to what extent, that we will have to sit and work out. But we are investing a lot of our resources in wind energy down south. Fair enough, you
Precisely,
can
sir.
do that.
In
But on a
Rajasthan, which
all
failed miserably,
but on an all India level, you
you
can
cannot do
use
that.
you
The
can
sunlight
only
is the
use
only way.
sunlight.
Sunlight.
So that is what
And
we need to do.
no, sir, absolutely. And I also thought, I'll tell you that, I mean, as when I was growing up, we used to be in a place in Rajasthan called Bardmer, and that place had massive deserts in 92 to 93. Now there is no desert left. It's all been shifted because oil, I think, was dug up and money came in the area, and I think they got dozers and shifted sand dunes. Now that's again destroying nature and trying to do something which was not supposed to be done on that piece of land, I believe, and I might be highly mistaken because I'm not an environmentalist, but from a law perspective, I think that is also a violation because you have, like how we've damaged Aravali's, and Gurgaon is slowly turning into a desert where you have these dust storms every summers, which are massive. and it does not rain so much there. And when it rains, it downpours, and it's done with. And it's raining in Delhi, it's not raining in Gurgaon. That's how shocking it is. And there is dust always there in Gurgaon. It seems like as if you're in a desert. 24/7 there is dust.
You mentioned Article 48
Right,
that
sir.
everyone has to save environment.
Right,
If
sir.
you use that, and if you use Article 21
Right,
of
sir.
right to life, and
Conflicting for us.
if we combine both on that count, most of the companies, most of the governments will have to end up in jail. But but having said that, development is about meeting
Essence. Yeah.
two extremes, somewhere midway.
Middle.
The tragedy has been that we are not meeting midway. We have shifted from being very frugal nation till 1980, 1990 to the other side of it, where like pent up demand of living good and becoming slothful is the norm, that nobody wants to now invest in saving the environment. There are people, I won't say that there aren't people there, but
Correct.
it's a very localized
Marginal.
initiative they'll do, that they have revived their own pond and or a
Correct.
small river. These kind of stories keep coming in, but it needs to have an all India impact, and that can be done by the governments. And governments are so hard pressed for either cash or imagination or commitment. I don't know. And this thing of that giving everyone good money in their banks will somehow deal with all the problems in the future. I don't think it is going to cut much ice, because there is a report which has worked on, which has shown the British over last 50 years, and that book was called Affluenza. It says that financial well-being hasn't resulted in personal or spiritual well-being for the people. It hasn't resulted in happiness. So we should learn from people in West that whatever we are trying to ape, does it have the right, does it hold anything substantial for us or not? And can we start our own new path? Can we chart a new course for ourselves? And the answer is yes, we can. The only thing is, we need to have a clear cut goal, and we have to then work with our people at the base, that we have to work now towards the goal. And that is, I think, is sadly missing.
No, absolutely, sir. And I think with this, I'll end this episode. And the third part, we are going to discuss some important case laws with you on environment, and then we'll compare the policies. And it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. So many things to highlight on, and whatever we have missed this time, we will have it in the third episode with you. And thank you so much for being with us. And for all the listeners, please go through our series. The third one is going to be even more interesting. And we are going to bring out the best that is. And with so much of knowledge that sir has, we've been able to cover a lot of things. And I think the third part will contain all the judgments that we can break down and talk about with regards to policies, sir. So thank you so much, sir. We had a pleasure chatting with you, and look forward to having the third episode with you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Paisa Vaisa with Anupam Gupta, Avinash Luthria, advice-only financial planner, and SEBI RII at Fiduciaries address the common mistakes that financial planners make while giving out advice. On Storytellers and Storysellers with Vineet, podcaster Nikesh Murali shares what goes into making a high-quality horror podcast. Learn how micro-meditations can help elevate our work on Smarter with Sid. On our Kannada podcast, Thalle Harate, Ganesh and Surya talk to Sandhya Rani, the award-winning writer of Kannada movie Nathi Charamani that's based on female desires and consent. And on Smile India, Shifa Mehta tells us a fascinating story behind India's first female railway announcer. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week on the network, Cred Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, My name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Paisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.